I was discarded after my wife inherited millions. So I signed the papers, disappeared completely, and let her fortune collapse while I built peace. My wife grabbed her cell with that dramatic flair she always had, and I could hear her aunt's voice through the speaker from across the kitchen. Her grandmother had passed away and left her everything, the entire estate. We're talking about a serious amount of money here, enough to change someone's life completely. At first, I was genuinely happy for her. I mean, losing someone you love is never easy, but knowing her grandmother wanted to take care of her future felt meaningful. I walked over and squeezed her shoulder while she was still on the call, thinking we'd process this together like married couples do. But the moment she hung up, I saw something shift in her expression. Not grief, not gratitude, something else entirely. "Can you believe it?" she said, but her tone wasn't excited. It was almost calculating. All those years of her telling me to be practical, to stay grounded. Turns out she was sitting on this the whole time. I nodded, still trying to read her mood. "It's incredible, honey. She must have really loved you to leave you everything." She looked at me then, and for the first time in our marriage, I felt like she was seeing me differently. Not as her husband, but as, what? An obstacle? A burden? "You know what this means, right?" she continued, walking to the window and staring out at the rain. "I don't have to worry about anything anymore. No more budgeting, no more compromising on things I want." The way she said compromising hit me wrong. We weren't rich, sure, but we were comfortable. I worked decent hours at a job that paid the bills, covered our mortgage, kept food on the table. We took vacations, went out to dinner, lived a normal middle-class life. What compromises was she talking about? Over the next few days, the phone calls with lawyers and financial advisors started. I tried to be supportive, even offered to help her organize the paperwork, but she waved me off. "I can handle this myself," she said. "It's not like it's complicated." Fair enough. It was her inheritance, her family money. I respected that. But then the comments started, small things at first. She'd look around our living room and make little observations. "This furniture is so basic." She'd flip through our streaming services and sigh. "We could afford so much better now." Now, like our previous life was some kind of prison sentence she'd just been released from. The real wake-up call came about 2 weeks later. We were at dinner with another couple, friends we'd known for years. The conversation naturally turned to her inheritance. It's hard to keep that kind of news quiet in a small social circle. "It must be such a relief," our friend said to both of us. "Financial security is such a gift." My wife smiled, but it wasn't a warm smile. "Oh, it definitely changes your perspective on things. On people." She looked directly at me when she said that last part. "What do you mean?" our friend asked, probably sensing the weird tension I was feeling. "Well," my wife said, setting down her wine glass with deliberate precision. "When you don't have to depend on someone else's income anymore, you start to see relationships more clearly. You realize what was necessity and what was actually choice." I felt my stomach drop. The table went quiet. "Necessity?" I asked, keeping my voice level despite the heat rising in my chest. She shrugged like she was discussing the weather. "I mean, let's be honest. How many decisions in our marriage were made because we had to consider your salary, where we lived, what we could afford, how we spent our weekends? Now I can actually make choices based on what I want, not what we can manage on your paycheck." Our friends exchanged uncomfortable glances. I excused myself to the bathroom, mainly to avoid saying something I'd regret in public. When I came back, the conversation had shifted to safer topics, but the damage was done. My wife had essentially announced to our friends that our entire marriage had been some kind of economic arrangement on her part. The drive home was silent. That night, lying in bed, I stared at the ceiling and tried to process what had just happened. This was the same woman who used to thank me for working overtime when she wanted something special. The same person who said she felt secure and loved because I took care of our household. Now, apparently, all of that was just necessity. I thought about the early years of our marriage. How proud she seemed when I got promoted. How she'd brag to her friends about my work ethic. How she used to say she felt lucky to have a husband who was responsible and dependable. Necessity. That's what it had all been to her. The inheritance money hit her account 3 weeks later. The very same day, she went shopping. Not grocery shopping, not practical shopping. She came home with bags from stores I'd never seen her enter before. Designer clothes with price tags still attached that made my eyes water. "Don't look at me like that," she said, noticing my expression. "I can afford this now." "I'm not looking at you like anything," I replied. "I'm just curious about the sudden shopping spree." She laughed, but it wasn't her normal laugh. It was sharper, more dismissive. I've been wanting these things for years. I just couldn't justify spending your money on them. Your money, not our money, not the family money, my money. That night, she modeled her new outfits, like we were teenagers again. But when she looked at me in the mirror, I could see it in her eyes. She wasn't showing off for me. She was showing off despite me, like she was proving a point about what she could do now that she was free from the constraints of my modest income. "What do you think?" she asked, spinning in a dress that probably cost more than I made in a week. "You look beautiful," I said, because she did. "But you always look beautiful." Her smile faded slightly. That's not what I meant. I knew exactly what she meant. She wanted me to acknowledge her financial independence. She wanted me to recognize that she didn't need me anymore. She wanted me to understand that the power dynamic in our marriage had fundamentally changed. And I did understand. I understood perfectly. The question was what I was going to do about it. The transformation happened faster than I thought possible. Within a month of getting the money, my wife became someone I barely recognized. She traded in her reliable Honda for a brand new BMW. Not a practical sedan, but a convertible sports car that cost more than most people's annual salary. When I asked if she'd thought about the insurance costs, she just laughed. "Insurance costs?" she repeated, like I'd asked her about the price of air. That's the kind of thinking I don't have to do anymore. The house got a complete makeover next. Professional interior designers, custom furniture, artwork that came with certificates of authenticity. I'd come home from work to find strangers rearranging our entire living space while my wife supervised with a glass of wine in hand. "Don't you love it?" she'd ask, gesturing at some abstract painting that looked like someone had sneezed on canvas. "It's so much more sophisticated than what we had before." What we had before was furniture we'd picked out together, photos from our trips, books we'd both read. Our life, basically. Now, it looked like a magazine spread for people who had more money than personality. But the worst part wasn't the spending. It was how she started treating me. She'd gotten into the habit of hosting these elaborate dinner parties, inviting people we barely knew just because they moved in the right social circles. I'd come home from work to find caterers in our kitchen, and my wife dressed like she was attending a gala. "Oh, there you are," she'd say when I walked in. But her tone suggested I was interrupting rather than coming home to my own house. "You might want to shower and change. People will be here soon. People, not friends, not our friends. People who mattered now that she had money." During these parties, she had a way of introducing me that made my skin crawl. "This is my husband. He works in, what do you call it again? Systems management." Like my job was some quaint hobby she couldn't quite understand. One evening, a guy in an expensive suit asked what I did for work. Before I could answer, my wife jumped in. "Oh, he has one of those steady, reliable jobs. Very practical," she said. "Practical, the same way other people might say contagious." The man nodded politely, then immediately turned the conversation back to my wife's new art collection. I excused myself early that night, claiming I had work in the morning. My wife didn't even look up from her conversation about gallery openings and charity auctions. This became the pattern. She'd plan these social events without consulting me, then act like I was the problem when I didn't enthusiastically participate in conversations about yacht clubs and wine tastings. "You're being antisocial," she told me after one particularly awkward evening. "These people could be good connections for us." "Connections for what?" I asked. "I have a job. We have friends. What exactly do we need connections for?" She stared at me like I just asked why we needed indoor plumbing. "You really don't get it, do you? This is our chance to move up in the world, to be around successful people instead of," she gestured vaguely in the direction of our old friend's neighborhood. "Instead of what? Instead of settling for mediocre." Mediocre. That's what our life had been to her. Mediocre. The final straw came on a Saturday morning in late November. I was making coffee, looking forward to a quiet weekend, when she walked into the kitchen, already dressed like she was going somewhere important. "I'm having lunch with some women from the country club," she announced, checking her reflection in her phone screen. "They're discussing charity board positions." "That sounds nice," I said, though I couldn't help wondering when she'd joined a country club. "Yes. Well, they're the kind of people who can open doors. Real doors, not the—" She paused, looking at me making coffee in my weekend clothes. "Not the kind of life where Saturday morning coffee at home is the highlight of someone's week." I set down my mug carefully. "What's wrong with Saturday morning coffee at home?" She sighed, the kind of exaggerated sigh that suggested I was being deliberately obtuse. "Nothing's wrong with it. If you're content with small things, if you don't want more out of life." "I thought you were happy," I said quietly. "I thought I was too," she replied. But that was before I realized what happiness actually looks like. She grabbed her purse, checked her appearance one more time, then paused at the kitchen doorway. "You know what I realized yesterday?" she said, not really asking. "I've spent years making decisions based on what we could afford together, where we could go on vacation, what kind of car we could manage, whether we could afford to go out to dinner on a weeknight. I compromised constantly." "We both compromised," I pointed out. "That's what married couples do." She shook her head. "No, I compromised. You just lived within your means. There's a difference." After she left, I sat in our kitchen, her kitchen apparently, and tried to understand how we'd gotten here. This was the same woman who used to surprise me with homemade dinners just because. The same person who said her favorite moments were quiet Sunday mornings when we didn't have anywhere to be. Now, those moments were evidence of a small, mediocre life she'd outgrown. The conversation I'd been dreading happened the following Tuesday. She was waiting for me when I got home from work, sitting in the living room with a glass of wine and a manila folder on the coffee table. "We need to talk," she said. I knew immediately what was in that folder. "I've been thinking a lot about us lately," she continued, her voice steady and businesslike, "about what we both want out of life. And I think we want very different things now." I didn't sit down. I just stood there waiting for her to say what we both knew was coming. "I think we should get a divorce." The words hung in the air between us. I wasn't surprised exactly, but hearing them out loud still felt like getting punched in the stomach. "I see," I said finally. She seemed surprised by my calm response. I think she'd expected me to argue, to fight for our marriage, to promise I could change or give her whatever she thought she needed. "I've already spoken to a lawyer," she continued, opening the folder and pulling out official-looking documents. "I want this to be fair and clean. No drama. Fair. As if there was a fair way to end a marriage because one person had decided the other wasn't good enough anymore. The papers are all there," she said, sliding the folder across the coffee table toward me. "My lawyer said you should probably get your own attorney to review everything, but honestly, it's pretty straightforward." I picked up the folder and flipped through the pages. Dissolution of marriage, division of assets, all very clean and official. "I'm keeping the house," she said matter-of-factly, obviously. "And my inheritance is separate property, so that's not part of the settlement, but you'll get your fair share of everything else. Your fair share." Like she was doing me a favor. I looked at the signature lines at the bottom of the final page. Her signature was already there, confident and decisive. "Any questions?" she asked. I had a million questions. I wanted to ask when exactly I'd become dead weight in her life. I wanted to ask if any of our marriage had been real to her, or if it had all just been economic necessity. I wanted to ask if she'd ever loved me, or if she'd just loved the security I provided. Instead, I picked up the pen she'd left on the table. "No questions," I said. I signed the papers without reading them thoroughly. I signed them without calling a lawyer. I signed them without negotiating or arguing or trying to change her mind. Her eyes widened slightly as I finished signing. I think my calm acceptance threw her off balance. "That's it?" she asked. "That's it," I confirmed, sliding the folder back across the table. I walked to the front door, grabbed my jacket, and headed for my car. "Where are you going?" she called after me. "Out," I said without turning around. As I drove away, I could see her in the rearview mirror, standing in the doorway of our house, watching me leave. She looked confused, like she'd expected a different reaction. But what reaction did she want? Tears? Begging? Promises to become the kind of man her new money required? I was done being someone's necessity, and I was definitely done being someone's disappointment. I didn't go back to the house that night, or the next night, or the night after that. I checked into a decent hotel downtown and started making phone calls, not to lawyers or friends or family members who might try to talk me out of what I was planning. I called a company that specializes in corporate relocations. "How quickly can you arrange a transfer to a different state?" I asked the representative. "Depends on the company and the position," she replied. "What's your timeline?" 2 weeks. She paused. "That's ambitious but not impossible. What field are you in?" Within 3 days, I had interviews lined up in Minneapolis, Denver, and Phoenix. Within a week, I had a job offer in Minneapolis that paid 15% more than what I was making. The company needed someone to start immediately, and they were willing to cover relocation expenses. Perfect. I went back to the house exactly once, on a Thursday afternoon when I knew my soon-to-be ex-wife would be at her weekly spa appointment. The place looked different already. More artwork, different furniture arrangements, fresh flowers, and expensive vases. She was already erasing our shared life and replacing it with her vision of sophistication. I packed methodically. Clothes, personal documents, a few books that meant something to me. I left behind anything we'd bought together. Anything that might remind me of who I used to be when I thought I was building a life with someone who valued me. The wedding photos stayed on the mantle, our furniture stayed where it was, even my tools in the garage stayed behind. I wanted nothing from that life except my freedom. I left no note, no forwarding address, no explanation. I did leave my wedding ring on the kitchen counter next to her coffee maker, where she'd be sure to find it. The move to Minneapolis happened faster than I thought possible. The relocation company handled everything. Within 2 weeks of signing those divorce papers, I was standing in an empty townhouse 1,500 meters away, watching the moving truck disappear down the street. My new life started immediately. No transition period, no looking back, no second guessing. I threw myself into my new job, learned the names of my key workers, found a decent gym, discovered which coffee shop made the best breakfast sandwiches. I changed my phone number the day I arrived. New state, new number, new service provider. I closed my old social media accounts and opened new ones under a slightly different name. I wasn't hiding exactly, but I wasn't making myself easy to find either. Meanwhile, according to a mutual friend who called my old number and got a disconnect message, my ex-wife was planning a celebration. She's throwing a party this weekend, the friend told me when she finally tracked down my work number. She's calling it a new chapter party. Apparently, she's inviting everyone we know. A party? She was throwing a party to celebrate getting rid of me. Are you okay? The friend asked. This whole situation is just weird. Nobody understands what happened. I'm fine, I told her. Better than fine, actually. And I was, for the first time in months, I felt like I could breathe properly. The party, from what I heard later, was everything you'd expect from someone with too much money and too little class. Catered food, open bar, professional DJ. She'd apparently told everyone that she was finally free to live the life she'd always wanted. According to another friend who attended and called me afterward, she kept checking her phone throughout the evening, looking toward the door every time someone arrived, making comments about how some people just can't handle change, and some people prefer to sulk rather than face reality. She was waiting for me to show up, waiting for me to make a scene, to beg her to reconsider, to prove that I couldn't handle life without her. But I was 2 states away, assembling furniture in my new place and researching good hiking trails in the area. The calls to my old number started that Sunday. According to the friend who eventually told me about this, my ex-wife spent the entire day trying to reach me. She called repeatedly, left voicemails that started angry, and gradually became more confused. Where the hell are you? Was apparently how the first message began. By the 10th message, she was asking friends if they'd heard from me. By the 20th, she was driving to places she thought I might be, my old gym, the coffee shop we used to go to, even my former workplace, where she learned I'd already given notice and cleared out my office. It took her 3 days to realize I was actually gone. Not hiding at a friend's place. Not staying at a hotel to make a point. Gone. The private investigator she hired. Yes, she actually hired a private investigator after 2 weeks of not being able to locate me. Told her later that I'd covered my tracks well. New job, new address, new phone number, new everything. A professional-level disappearing act, but that was much later. In those first few months, I focused on building something entirely new. I joined a hiking group and spent weekends exploring trails around the Twin Cities. I took a cooking class and learned how to make things that didn't come from a box or a restaurant. I started reading books again, something I'd somehow stopped doing during the last few years of my marriage. I bought furniture that I actually liked, not furniture that looked expensive or sophisticated. Comfortable chairs, a good mattress, a kitchen table where I could sit and eat breakfast while looking out at the trees in my small backyard. Most importantly, I stopped checking over my shoulder, stopped wondering what she was doing or thinking or planning, stopped caring whether she missed me or regretted her decision. I found out later that she'd expected me to come crawling back. Within a month, she told several people that I was just being dramatic and would realize I couldn't make it without her once the reality of living alone set in. She kept the house exactly as it was for the first 6 months after I left, apparently convinced I'd return and apologize for whatever tantrum she thought I was throwing. But I wasn't throwing a tantrum. I wasn't making a statement or trying to teach her a lesson. I was just done. Done being someone's backup plan. Done being the practical choice someone settled for. Done being part of a life that someone else considered mediocre. By my first winter in Minneapolis, I'd established routines that had nothing to do with my former life. I'd made new friends who knew me as I was now, not as half of a couple that had fallen apart. I'd learned to appreciate quiet Saturday mornings again, but this time they were mine by choice, not because I couldn't afford anything better. I was building the kind of life that belonged to me completely. And for the first time since I could remember, that felt like enough. 3 years into my new life in Minneapolis, I got an unexpected phone call from our old neighbor back home. We'd been friendly, but not close, so hearing from him was surprising. "I hope you don't mind me calling," he said after we'd exchanged basic pleasantries. "I got your number from your old company's directory. I wanted to ask you something, but I wasn't sure if it was appropriate." "What's up?" I asked, genuinely curious. "It's about your ex-wife," he said carefully. "I don't know if you keep in touch or if you even want to know, but things have gotten pretty rough for her lately." I wasn't sure how to respond to that. Part of me was curious, but a bigger part of me had worked hard to stop caring about her life entirely. "Rough how?" I found myself asking, despite my better judgment. "Well, she lost the house last month for foreclosure, and I think she's moved back in with her parents temporarily." This caught me off guard. The house was paid off when we divorced. "How do you lose a house that doesn't have a mortgage? She took out a loan against it about 18 months ago," he continued, apparently reading my confusion and my silence. A big one. "Then she couldn't make the payments." Over the next 20 minutes, he filled me in on what had been happening in the life I'd left behind. The picture he painted was both shocking and, if I'm being honest, predictable. The spending had continued after I left, but it had escalated dramatically. Designer clothes became designer everything. The BMW had been traded up to a Mercedes, then to a Porsche. She'd taken trips to Europe, bought jewelry that cost more than most people's cars, renovated the house twice in 2 years. She was throwing parties every few weeks, the neighbor told me. Big, expensive affairs, catered, decorated, the whole thing. I think she was trying to establish herself in some social circle, but it was costing her a fortune. And the loan against the house? That happened when the inheritance money started running low. I think she thought it was just a temporary measure, a way to maintain her lifestyle while she figured out her next move. But the payments were brutal, and she didn't have steady income. No steady income. Because why would someone with unlimited money need to work? She tried to get a job about 6 months ago, he continued. But she'd been out of the workforce for so long, and her expectations were unrealistic. She wanted executive-level positions without recent experience. When that didn't work out, she tried to start some kind of consulting business, but it never got off the ground. The math was brutal, but simple. Inheritance money, no matter how substantial, has limits, especially when you're spending like it's unlimited and have no income to replenish it. The house sale didn't even cover what she owed on it, the neighbor said, the loan plus all the credit cards she'd maxed out renovating and redecorating. She walked away with nothing. The woman who'd called our comfortable middle-class life mediocre was now starting over with less than we had when we got married. I probably shouldn't be telling you this, the neighbor admitted. But she's been asking people about you, where you went, if anyone has your contact information. I think the reality of her situation is hitting pretty hard. After we hung up, I sat in my kitchen in Minneapolis, processing this information. I felt nothing. Not satisfaction, not pity, not vindication. Just nothing. I'd built a good life here. I'd been promoted twice at my new job and was making more money than I'd ever imagined. I'd bought a small cabin about an hour north of the city where I spent weekends hiking, reading, and enjoying the kind of quiet that used to be considered mediocre. More importantly, I'd started dating again. Nothing serious yet, but I'd met a few women who seemed to appreciate the life I'd built, rather than seeing it as something to improve upon or escape from. The neighbor's call reminded me of something I'd almost forgotten. How much energy I used to spend trying to be enough for someone who fundamentally didn't think I was enough. 2 months later, I got another call. This time, it was from a different old friend, someone I'd known since college. "Dude, this is going to sound crazy, but I think your ex-wife tried to contact me on Facebook. He said she sent me a message asking if I knew how to reach you. Said it was important." "What did you tell her?" "Nothing." I didn't respond, but the message was intense. She said she needed to talk to you about something urgent, that she'd made some mistakes and wanted to make things right. Very dramatic. Important. Urgent mistakes. She wanted to make things right. She also mentioned that she'd been trying to call your old number and it was disconnected. He continued, "I think she's been trying to reach you for a while." That night, I found myself thinking about the woman I'd married versus the woman who'd handed me divorce papers because I wasn't sophisticated enough for her new lifestyle. I wondered which version was real, or if they both were. But wondering didn't change anything. I'd made my choice when I signed those papers and disappeared. I'd chosen to start over completely, rather than fight for someone who'd already decided I wasn't worth fighting for. 6 months later, the calls and Facebook messages apparently escalated. Friends started reaching out more frequently, all with variations of the same story. My ex-wife was actively searching for me, asking mutual acquaintances for information, even reaching out to people she barely knew if she thought they might have a connection to me. She seems desperate, one friend told me. Not just financially, though I think that's part of it. More like emotionally desperate. Like she's finally realizing what she gave up. What she gave up. Interesting way to phrase it. From what I gathered through these secondhand reports, she'd spent the better part of 2 years trying to maintain the lifestyle she thought she deserved, burning through money and relationships at an alarming rate. The country club friends had disappeared when the money ran out. The sophisticated social circle had moved on to someone else with deeper pockets. She was alone, broke, and apparently starting to understand that financial security and human connection aren't the same thing. But that was her lesson to learn, not mine to teach. I'd already learned mine that sometimes the most loving thing you can do for yourself is walk away from someone who doesn't value what you bring to their life. And I'd learned it well enough that even hearing about her desperation didn't make me want to rescue her from the consequences of her own choices. Some people spend years trying to find themselves. I'd found myself by losing someone who never really wanted to find me in the first place. 5 years after signing those divorce papers, I was living the kind of life I'd never imagined possible. My townhouse was paid off early. I'd been promoted to senior management, and I was in a solid relationship with someone who appreciated quiet Saturday mornings as much as I did. Then my work phone rang on a Tuesday afternoon. "Is this you?" an unfamiliar voice asked. "I mean, are you the one who used to live in Ohio?" The voice belonged to a private investigator named Rodriguez. "Professional, direct, no small talk." "Depends who's asking," I replied. "Your ex-wife hired me to find you. She's been trying to locate you for about 2 years now. Says she has something important to discuss." 2 years. She'd been actively searching for me for 2 years. She asked me to tell you she found 300 missed calls on your old phone number, Rodriguez continued. The phone company kept records even after the line was disconnected. So she's been calling that number regularly for 5 years. 300 calls over 5 years. That was more than 1 call per week to a number that had been dead since the day I left. "She wants to meet," he said. "Says she'll travel wherever you are. Money's not an issue for the travel, though. From what I can tell, money is definitely an issue for everything else." I asked him what he meant by that. "She's broke," he said bluntly. "Living with her parents, working retail at some department store. The cousin who hired me is paying my fees because she can't afford them herself. This is someone who went from wealthy to completely tapped out in record time. And now she wants to talk. Now she wants to talk," he confirmed. She gave me a long speech about mistakes and regrets, and how she's learned what really matters in life. Standard stuff, but she seemed sincere about it. I told Rodriguez I'd think about it and call him back, but I didn't need to think about it. I'd been done with that chapter of my life for 5 years. Whatever she needed to say, whatever closure she was looking for, it wasn't my responsibility to provide it. I called him back that evening and told him I wasn't interested in meeting. "She kind of expected that response," he said. "She asked me to tell you that she understands if you don't want to see her, but she's going to be in Minneapolis this weekend anyway. Says she'll wait at that coffee shop on Grand Avenue where you apparently used to go. Seems to know a lot about your current routines." "A lot about my current routines?" That was unsettling. "How much does she know about my life here?" I asked. "Enough to be concerning," Rodriguez admitted. "She knows where you work, where you live, what gym you go to. She's been researching you for months before she hired me. I just made it official." Great. My ex-wife had been stalking me from 1,500 meters away. "Look," Rodriguez continued, "I've been doing this job for 15 years. I can usually tell when someone's genuinely remorseful versus just desperate. This woman is both, but the remorse seems real. She's not asking for money or trying to get back together. She just wants to apologize and explain herself. And if I don't show up, then she goes home and you never hear from her again. That's what she promised anyway." Friday afternoon, I found myself walking past that coffee shop on Grand Avenue, not because I was planning to meet her, but because I was curious. After 5 years of complete silence, I wanted to see what desperation looked like on someone who used to have everything. She was there, sitting at a corner table, looking nothing like the sophisticated woman who'd thrown me away for not being good enough for her new lifestyle. She looked tired, older. Her clothes were clean but obviously inexpensive. Her hair was pulled back in a simple ponytail, instead of the elaborate style she'd favored during her wealthy phase. She was checking her phone constantly, looking toward the door every few seconds. I watched her for about 10 minutes from across the street. Part of me felt sorry for her. The larger part remembered how it felt to be called mediocre by someone who'd promised to love me forever. I didn't go into the coffee shop. Instead, I went home to my girlfriend who was making dinner and wanted to hear about my day. But seeing her there, waiting desperately for a conversation I had no intention of having, told me everything I needed to know about how the last 5 years had treated her. And it told me even more about how well they treated me. Saturday morning arrived with an unexpected knock on my front door. I was making coffee, enjoying the peaceful start to my weekend when the doorbell rang. Through the peephole, I saw her. She looked worse up close than she had from across the street at the coffee shop. The confidence and arrogance that had defined her during our divorce were completely gone, replaced by something that looked like genuine desperation. I opened the door, but didn't invite her in. "Hi," she said quietly. "I know you didn't want to meet, but I had to try one more time." "How did you get my address?" I asked. "The investigator. I'm sorry for just showing up, but I've been trying to reach you for 5 years. 5 years of thinking about what I did, what I said, how badly I messed up everything." She looked past me into my house, taking in what she could see of the life I'd built without her. "You look good," she continued. "Happy. I'm glad." I didn't respond. I just waited for her to say whatever she'd traveled 1,500 meters to say. "I know you don't owe me anything," she said, her voice starting to break. "I know I have no right to be here, but I need you to know that I'm sorry. I'm so incredibly sorry for how I treated you, for the things I said, for throwing away the best thing in my life because I was too stupid to see what I had." "Okay," I said simply. She seemed surprised by my calm response. I think she'd expected anger or emotion or some kind of dramatic reaction. "I lost everything," she continued. "The money, the house, all those friends who only cared about what I could spend on them. I'm working retail now, living with my parents, and I spend every day thinking about how different things could have been if I hadn't been so selfish and blind. I'm sorry that happened to you," I said, and I meant it. "But I'm not sure what you want me to say. I want you to know that I love you," she said, the words rushing out like she'd been holding them in for years. "I never stopped loving you. I just got caught up in the money and the lifestyle, and the idea that I deserved something better, when what I had was already perfect." This was the moment she'd been building toward. The grand gesture, the heartfelt confession, the plea for forgiveness and reconciliation.
"I appreciate you telling me that," I said, "but it doesn't change anything." Her face crumpled. "Please. I know I don't deserve it, but could we try again? Could we start over? I'm different now. I understand what really matters." "You're different because you have to be," I replied. "Because the money ran out and the lifestyle wasn't sustainable. That's not the same as actually changing." "That's not fair," she protested. "I've learned from my mistakes. I've grown as a person." "Maybe you have," I said. "But I've grown too, and the person I am now doesn't have room for someone who treated me the way you did." She started crying then. Not the dramatic tears of someone trying to manipulate a situation, but the quiet, broken sobs of someone who'd finally run out of options. "I know I hurt you," she whispered. "I know I said terrible things and made you feel like you weren't enough, but you were enough. You were everything, and I threw it all away for nothing." "You threw it away because at the time you genuinely believed I wasn't enough," I corrected her. "You didn't make a mistake in the heat of the moment. You made a calculated decision based on what you thought your life should look like." She looked up at me, makeup running down her cheeks. "So, there's nothing I can say? Nothing I can do?" "There's nothing to do," I said gently. "What happened between us is finished. I'm not angry with you anymore, but I'm not available for a second chance either." Are you seeing someone?" she asked. "Yes," I said, "someone who values the kind of life we're building together instead of seeing it as something to improve upon." At that moment, I heard a car door slam in the driveway. My girlfriend was home from her morning run. "I need you to leave now," I said firmly, "and I need you to not come back. What we had is over and it's been over for 5 years. You need to accept that and find a way to move forward with your life." She nodded through her tears, understanding that this was truly the end. "I hope you can forgive me someday," she said as she started walking toward her rental car. "I already have," I replied, "but forgiveness doesn't mean reconciliation." As she drove away, my girlfriend jogged up the driveway. "Who was that?" she asked, breathing hard from her run. "Nobody important," I said, and realized as I said it that it was completely true. The woman, who'd once been the center of my world, had become exactly what she'd always seen me as, irrelevant to the life that really mattered. The difference was, I'd built a life that actually mattered,
and she was still looking for someone else to build one for her. Our story has come to an end. If you've made it this far, how about subscribing to our channel? It helps us immensely. I've selected 2 other videos for you that I'm sure you'll enjoy. Feel free to click on them. I'll be waiting for you in the next story. See you soon.